Hi there. Welcome to the From Lab to Launch podcast by Qualio, where we share inspiring stories from the people on the front lines of life sciences. Tune in and leave inspired to bring your life-saving products to the world.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into From Lab to Launch. Today, we're glad you're here. I'm Kelly from Qualio, and I'm your host. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate the podcast. That helps us out a lot. If you want to be on the show, you can fill out the application form linked in the show notes as well. We'd love to hear from you. Today, I am really excited to welcome Tanja Dowe, CEO of Debiopharm Innovation Fund. She's joining us all the way from Switzerland. It's so awesome to see how we're connecting folks from around the world in this whole industry. I love it. Tanja has a background in microbiology and biochemistry and is an expert in business models and market requirements for life science companies. We're going to learn from her experience in acquisitions, investments, and commercialization of life sciences companies across Europe, as well as some recent investments here in the US. Check out the show notes for her full bio and links to what she and the team are up to at Debiopharm. All right, let's get started. Tanja, give us an overview of your career from biochemistry in college to consulting to now CEO.
Right. So, I was always interested in life sciences, in anything related to human health, whether it's through microbiology, biochemistry, medicine. My father was a doctor, and when I was 5 years old, he told me all about how, the surgeries that he performed in hospitals, and I ended up drawing pictures in kindergarten about people's intestines and their organs. So that kind of started me on this spin towards life sciences. Right after, straight out of university, I started my first company, market research. Prior to that, I had done some internships in market research in biotechnology in the end of 90s, right beginning of 2000s. And that was a crazy period where a lot of biotech companies were being formed, and the pharma business model was changing. They were not anymore doing so much research, where they were realizing that they're going to have to partner with biotechs. It was very exciting time. I got really excited about this new innovation and opportunities, and how startups could actually come with academic research background and innovations and really build some new therapies, diagnostics and medical solutions for patients. So I started my own company in market research to help these startups really get to the next level. Ended up selling my business to a little bit larger boutique company, and then moved there from market research to actually managing partner eventually. So I became a partner of the company that acquired my company. So that was a kind of a nice story. Over the years, I worked with more than 80, I think it was 86 companies. And at the end, in various projects over 15 years, we worked with large multinational companies to really early startups, and everything about this innovation. How do you move innovation from startup perspective? How do you bring that to the market? How do you commercialize? How do you find partners? And from big industry perspective, how the heck are we going to have access to that innovation? And that was really, really exciting. That kind of started the work in towards becoming an investor, because about 5 years ago, I said to myself, okay, midlife crisis, I can still do something new, or I'll just stick to my own company for the rest of my life. But I was really interested in kind of learning a new professional area. And then a phone call came at the right time, and I joined Debiopharm Innovation Fund, leading. It's a corporate venture arm of the Swiss pharma company Debiopharm, and Debiopharm develops oncology and infectious disease drugs, and we invest in digital health in these areas.
Awesome. That's interesting too, that you mentioned the whole transition from, because I started my career about the same time, late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember when, the big companies, the Pfizers of the world, the Baxters, had these huge R&D budgets and these huge teams that were trying to develop products. And it's been a really interesting journey, how those organizations have transitioned to no longer doing R&D. Instead, it's all the small biotechs. How do they become attractive for acquisition? And so you and I have a lot of parallels there. I've been helping those orgs from a quality system perspective for the last 8 years now. It's always fascinating to me to hear what those of us with our bio degrees go off and do in the world, and how we can
Exactly.
all help get these products to market. So that's really exciting. What is your mission at Debiopharm? I know you mentioned the oncology space. So talk to us about that mission a little bit.
All right. So the mission is to invest in digital health and therapeutic platforms that really radically transform the way we treat patients and the way we develop drugs. We're trying to build the future together with the startups. And why we are doing that is, of course, because Debiopharm as a drug developer would like to kind of stay up on top of, as an early adopter of new technologies. It increases our competitiveness when we are using the newest tools in AI or running our clinical trials virtually, or as much as possible using real world data and so on. So we invest in startups to help them build that future. And then Debiopharm as a company learns from these startups and is able to use the novel technologies in more efficiently in the front line. And that's really the kind of the reason behind one of the things which is also extremely important for pharmas and companies that have existed for tens of years is, how do you maintain this sort of a startup spirit? How do you keep the agility of the company? How do you not become more focused on processes and bureaucracy? And how do you make sure that you're adopting all the time to new trends, how you're using newest tools? So this startup spirit is something important that a lot of CVCs are also looking for.
Definitely. Yeah, it's tough to maintain that. There has to be a balance for sure. So you guys invested in Verisym. Tell us about that. And why did you choose it?
There are some other AI tech companies as well that we've invested before, but let me walk you through a little bit our thinking behind investing in Verisym Life. So we were looking at the drug development pipeline, kind of drug discovery to development all the way to the market, that value chain. And we were saying, look, we have to disrupt this. We have to turn this into digital. We can't be doing it the same way as we've been doing it for tens of years. The costs are just getting bigger and bigger, and we're bringing to market more drugs with higher and higher expense, and of course, following that, the drugs are more and more expensive. So we're really we looked at this drug development value chain and wanted to piece by piece look for alternative ways of doing things. Obviously, virtually, using computational biology, using simulation, modeling, AI, data, whatever we can to every piece of that development value chain, change it. We don't think that there's one company that's going to immediately change everything. We believe that there are several companies working in that field. We invested in Nova Discovery that does a modeling and simulation of clinical trials. We invested in Nuclei, that was an AI investment where they're building digital biomarkers through pathology. And we were really, when we saw Verisym Life, we knew there was a fit. They are really a unique player in this drug development pipeline. They're focused on translational medicine. They're using AI and modeling to really do virtual or in silico translational medicine and beyond. And we haven't seen anybody in the industry do exactly the same. No one else is really focused on that translational medicine. And when you think about it, translational medicine is really a pivotal part of drug development. That's where your science, you're translating it through animals to humans to really see that what you've been doing in the labs and the science, what you've been doing, how does that really work? And we were really excited, of course, when we met Joe, the CEO, as well. We want to work with good teams, good people. We loved her passion, her ambition, and that was the story.
Nice. When you're looking at an investment or an acquisition, is there something in particular that you wish founders would ask you during the process?
Yeah, I would say that we're always trying to differentiate. All the investors have one thing in common: we all have money. But what is the added value that we can bring? And I want to tell, all the startup entrepreneurs out there, make sure that you don't just take the money. Make sure that there's a good connection. There's added value. So please ask us, how can we help you? What else can we bring than money? And then really about this, you're going to be working with us for quite a while. The mutual sort of trust, integrity, these are important things. I'd love to hear, because I always ask from startups as well, or entrepreneurs, what are their values? And feel free to ask that as well. I think that it's important that we share the same values when we go into an investment together.
Absolutely. Yeah, those seem absolutely critical to a successful partnership.
Right.
So you've been involved with strategy or transaction projects in over 80 companies at this point over the years. Are there any that stand out? Some that are most memorable?
Yeah, I would say that always what excites me is the early startup stages, where there's a click that goes in the entrepreneur's mind, the founder's mind. They find something that's not working today, and they realize that it's just a small thing to fix that. And it's usually the best ideas are just this type of click. Oh, wow, I know how to solve that. And then building from that, turning that idea to business, having that excitement and passion and working for a purpose with good people. That's super exciting. But if I take some more precise examples, and maybe from larger companies that I worked with, I was really impressed by the time scale and the systematic approach by large Japanese companies. In health tech, the way that they worked was there was a kind of a vision of where they wanted to go, and the depth of work they did to kind of find the right path to a new market or new technology. It could take a couple of years to really build that field knowledge. And once they had that, the acquisitions happened really fast. So they would be following a field quite closely, going to events, having research done, and then once they had identified the ones that they wanted to acquire, it was fast and very efficient. So this was something that I always remember. Another thing that is important, this is also for all startup companies and scale-up companies that are venture-backed, and eventually you're going to need to look for an exit, whether it is an IPO or a M&A acquisition. It sounds great when you're kind of building the case, and it gets very complex during the negotiations. But what you have to remember at all points of the negotiation and going towards that transaction process is what happens after the post-acquisition, the post-merger integration of teams, ensuring that there's a fit. And this is I may be talking even more to the acquirers to ensure that you do enough work to ensure that the post-merger integration works. And also for the startup companies, make sure that the company that's maybe acquiring or you're negotiating a share purchase agreement with, that they talk to your people, they build that path, how you're going to work together, make sure there's chemistry. Because if you do not have that, you're wonderful, entrepreneurs are passionate about what their product is. And if the post-integration doesn't work, I've seen too many times when the business success is hindered, and sometimes the business just never really materializes because of that integration issue. We're just people, we're acquiring businesses, but we need to work with people. So make sure that works. That's something, maybe a learning from my career.
Yeah, no, that's, again, speaks to that whole team and partnership and how that all needs to go really well, for sure. Definitely.
Right.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned Japan, because the next thing I wanted to ask you about was, what are you seeing are main differences between commercialization in Europe versus America? Japan's always an interesting one too, from my time in the industry and stuff. Their pathways and their concerns are different than US or Europe or Canada or Australia or any of them.
Exactly.
But in your experience, I guess if we stick to Europe and America, what are you seeing as main differences that need to be considered in that commercialization process?
Yeah, exactly. So Europe is fragmented. So from the US perspective, it looks like, wow, they have market is fragmented. They have 50 million people on that market, 40 in here, 35 million here, 10 million here. How do you tackle that? There's language barriers between each country. There's maybe even different regulations. Reimbursement for sure is different. So how do you tackle that? On the other hand, when I look at the US, and especially from European perspective, it's huge opportunity. It's monstrously big opportunity for any company, but it's a really tough market, and there's a lot of good competition. So, neither one of these markets are easy. So I would always say to European companies, because European companies always want to enter USA at some point, remember to also build your base in Europe, because on the other hand, US companies don't necessarily expand to Europe, at least in the earlier years. European companies tend to try to enter US market when, around Series B, but US companies only later, once it's really growth stage, large revenue generating maybe 10 million, then they start looking at the European market. So ensure that as a European company that you have the European market, because that has value later on, whether you're collaborating with US companies or you want to be acquired or you want to acquire, this is your one of your strongholds. On the other hand, for US companies, I also want to remind that Europe is not a heterogeneous market. So you have the Nordics that are really advanced in digitally advanced markets. So a lot of those digital health products, you can maybe have more ready markets in the Northern Europe. On the other hand, in Germany, you have DIGA, which is the digital therapeutics reimbursement system, and so on and so on. So every country, so make sure that you have some European advice and try to, when you enter Europe, there might be some low-hanging fruits for US companies as well.
Yes, it's interesting. I worked on a project where we were going to try to do some clinical trials in Poland and Romania, but then, the conversations around, could we use that data back here in the US? How are the populations alike? How are they different? All those kinds of things. And, very narrow, very specific indication. It was, it was a challenge. And I think it really, you're right. I think outside of industry, which is often where like the entrepreneur base comes from, has a perception. They're like, oh yeah, it's Europe, they all fall under EU regs. Like, no.
Exactly.
Like, from a the IMPD content, pretty consistent, but then every single country, even if they are recognized under EU, has their own requirements to get through that regulatory pathway. And that can be a huge challenge and a huge, so then at some point you have to go back to your investors and say, hey, I know we were talking about Europe, but we've looked at that strategy and you're either going to have to give us more money or maybe we're going to wait on that one until later.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have experienced that one. That one's always interesting. If you could go back and tell yourself something at the start of your career, knowing what you know now, what would you say?
Wow. There's so many things that I wish I could tell myself, but really I was thinking about this. Build your knowledge, build your knowledge base piece by piece and be patient, because everyone's journey in the career journey is unique. So, and don't try to imitate, all my friends from university are doing this and this, but find your own path and have faith, because once you get, later in your life, once you get to my young age, it's you realize that you really need unique perspectives when you sit on boards, when you invest. Everyone, for example, in my team, I've tried to collect very, different people with different backgrounds, different career journeys, because they've all seen different things, and that kind of spectrum of different unique personalities, unique career paths, they build power. And so really, make your own choices. If sometimes you don't get a job that you really wanted, don't worry, you're gonna have your chance, and just one step at a time, build it. Don't worry, you're doing good, and dare to take steps that no one else is doing.
Awesome. I love that. So where online can people find you to follow along?
Yes. So I'm mostly in LinkedIn. So everything that I will publish somewhere else is going to end up on my LinkedIn account. There's some interesting resources that we have on our webpage at Debiopharm Innovation Fund, such as a recent paper we wrote on Series A to scale up. What are some of the lessons learned and best practices from our portfolio companies and from several investors that we interviewed? So that might be interesting for companies looking for Series A, or having maybe built their Series A and trying to figure out how do you build the scale up capability to scale up. And so follow the LinkedIn. There's also another paper that we're working on. We'll probably publish it around mid-year on exits, and as a Series A and post Series A, Series B entrepreneur, what do you have to think about exits, and how can you make sure that you come out of it as a winner one day?
Oh, perfect. That's I think that'll be exactly the kinds of information our listeners in that space will be looking for. Thank you so much for your time today, Tanja. It was absolutely amazing to meet you. I feel like we could talk a whole lot more. I'd love to connect with you maybe again sometime soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kelly. This was a great pleasure to speak with you, and wonderful to have this European-US connection. And I think that, we maybe have to thank COVID for making the world a little smaller place.
It has made it a little smaller in a lot of ways, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my goodness. What fun. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of From Lab to Launch, brought to you by Qualio. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and give the show a positive review. It really helps us out. For more information about Qualio, our guest today, or to be a guest on a future episode, please refer to the show notes. Until next time.